Welcome to the Farming on Purpose podcast, a podcast for farmers and ranchers ready to shift for a stronger future. Today's challenges in agriculture are new, but the grit and determination required to be successful are not. On the Farming on Purpose podcast, you'll hear how producers of all sizes and practices are moving mountains for things they believe in, all in the name of an industry that keeps growing and innovating for a stronger food system and stronger farm families. I'm your host, Lexi Wright, and I'm excited to discuss where producers are finding success, challenging the status quo, striving for better, and keeping our heritage alive, all while producing the food we depend on. Welcome back to Farming on Purpose. Today I have Charity Epperson with me. Charity is located in Northern California near the Sonoma County coast, and she grew up residing on a 2,000-acre preserve, which I'm excited to learn more about that, and has always had a deep respect for nature and agriculture. With the help of her husband, Sam, and their son, Tristan, she has embarked on a journey of raising Icelandic sheep and kuni pigs on some of Sam's family land there. And her passion lies in providing nutrient-dense proteins while exercising responsible land and animal management and getting more involved in your community all the time. So I'm so excited to have you here, Charity. That's just a very brief overview, I'm sure, of what that journey was like to get to where you're at today. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the journey that you've been on to get to where you're at?
Yeah, so I did grow up on a 2,000-acre preserve in the Bay Area. It wasn't as far from society as where I live now, but it was definitely more off-grid. So we literally shared our water with the cattle. So whatever was in their trough, it went to the house and it was like filtered through a water system. And we had like probably one of the very first solar systems that was probably made. It was the worst solar system. It ran one light and like a TV, or you could run like the washing machine and no lights. So yeah,
I like a homemade solar system, or
it was one that was bought. So basically my mom was hired. She's a park ranger, or I shouldn't say she's just a park ranger. She's a naturalist too. Like she does like guided hikes and like educational stuff. So she got hired to live and work on this preserve. So we like upped and moved to this preserve when I think it was like 5. And yeah, it was the worst solar system that they bought for the house. And we roughed it out for a very long time like that. I had friends over and they were like, why can't we have the light on? Not in the bedroom and the living room. And I'm like, well, so yeah, I grew up out there. So I learned a lot living out there as far as like land management and how the cattle and the sheep can like, play an important role in that. And I think that's kind of where my love for both of those came from. We didn't own any livestock ourselves. Really, we had, we raised our pigs. We had a couple pigs that we raised for our freezer and a couple sheep we raised for the freezer. But I got to go help on the neighboring ranch. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like, and just seeing the simplicity of it, yet it's not simple. I just liked how it all kind of like intertwined. And so that always sat with me. And I wanted as, an adult, I'm like, I really want to be a part of that. Fast forward to an adult, I married my husband, Sam, and they have their family ranch. It used to be 50,000 acres on the Sonoma coast. It was one brother that owned it. And then the other brothers came over and it kind of got divvied up. And so Sam's family ended up with 5,000. Today, it's only 1,800 acres. And they lease it out to vineyards and cattle ranchers that live down the road. And they themselves no longer have any ranching stuff going on. So in 2018, I decided that I was tired of like the day-to-day. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go after this. I'm gonna do it. I had a love for sheep. I had a love for pigs. And so that's kind of what I did. And it's just been kind of like a wild, like transition from, going from like normal life to this and then living where I live. It has been so, just so crazy. So that's kind of like how I've gotten to like where I'm at, with Wild Things Ranch, from like living on the preserve to living here, and then just deciding enough's enough and I'm going to do what I want to do and be happy doing it. And I have the full support, of everyone around me for the most part. Everyone's been really great. And, on the hard days being like, Charity, you got this, you got this. So yeah, that's kind of like where I'm at with that.
That's incredible to have that support. It makes such a huge difference, regardless of what you're doing. Yeah. And just having that is so empowering.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, such a beautiful childhood, it sounds like, to get to grow up just surrounded by nature on that preserve. I always think it's funny hearing more of people's stories unfold than what I knew just from like following you on Instagram or, content that you put online, because I think that there's something about like the way people present themselves that we align with unknowingly. And then when later you find out more, it's like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. When I was growing up, my dad worked for NRCS and he was a biologist and a soil conservationist. And so I approach ag, like that was my first introduction to ag, was about wildlife habitats and, that kind of thing. And it's so funny to hear, like, knowing now that that's probably a big piece of why I resonated so much with your social media content, is because we probably grew up very similarly in that. So
yeah, and it is always funny to like see like when you start to hear more people's stories, you're like, oh, that's why we like connect and like relate. Yeah,
it's funny. So that is really cool that you are getting this crazy opportunity to do your own livestock on family land. When you got started with that, you said that it was a change that you were looking for in your day to day and to do things that you were more passionate about. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that process was like? Was it like, oh my gosh, I need out so bad, I need to do something different? Or was it a gradual thing that you were like, I want to try this? What did that look like?
It was more gradual. I think experiencing burnout, and so I own a photography business, and I loved it. But I think when you love something so much, you're like, oh, I'm going to make money at it. Sometimes that thing just needs to remain like something private, something that you can just go and enjoy. That's kind of where I got with the photography. I was like, I don't really like the business side of it. I like to do it just for me. So that was kind of like my realization. I was like, oh no, like I need to make a switch. So I did it gradually. I actually didn't talk to my husband about doing it. I actually talked to my neighbor, and I was like, I really want to do this. I want to get a few pigs and a few sheep and just kind of like feel it out. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I just don't think like Sam, my husband, would be like for it. She's like, just do it. She's like, he'll support you. And I was like, okay. So I went and bought 2 pigs, and he was like, okay, this is cool. And then I think it was like a year later, I went and bought 4 sheep, and he was like, okay, this is cool. The ranch used to actually be a sheep ranch. They used to have thousands of sheep, and he used to help when he was a kid. So I think he thought I was going to stop at the 4. And I've just gradually been adding. I'm like, it's like chicken math, but sheep math.
My goodness.
But yeah, it's been gradual. Recently, it's been like getting more and more. Because I think I'm at that point where I'm like in the middle where like it either needs to like go or just stay. So I think I'm going. But yeah, that's that. It was a gradual switch, and it was a really good switch too. Like I was able to like notify all my clients, and my family was like, you seem so much more happier. And I was able to actually stay home on the ranch and not have to travel all over, because that was like another big stressor. And then I had the issue with my son. So finding daycare out here is like so hard. So it was always like a constant struggle. And my husband works out of town. So it kind of like, when I started to look at the big picture of it, I was like, this actually works so much better for our lifestyle. We can be at home on the ranch. I can be here with my son, and I can start this business. And so I did it. But like, it was a gradual shift into it.
That's
I think it was like a year before I decided I was going to like make it like a business, before I actually like did it.
That's really cool. You were able to kind of do that gradually. I think that makes it so much easier when you still have like some income that you can be bringing in, and then you can gradually taper off and into the next thing. It makes it less stressful, at least.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I want to circle back to the off-grid piece because I am fascinated, absolutely fascinated by off-grid living. And I know that it's like there's lots of different approaches to it. You can do it because it's fun and to see how far you can go off-grid. And some people do it out of necessity because of what's available to them in their area. Do you guys, are you still off-grid at all, or was that just growing up, or what's that look like now?
So we actually off-grid. I grew up off-grid, and then I moved into town for college and stuff. And Sam and I started dating, and he had a house in Santa Rosa, so we lived in town for quite a while before we moved to the ranch. And then in 2008, I think it was 2009, we moved to the ranch. And he was like, hey, so the house that we're moving into is off grid. And I was like, okay, big whoop. I grew up off grid. And he's like, no, this is like really off grid. And so we moved there. I was like, this is not like that bad. Like, it had a generator, the solar panels worked, we had all the batteries, the whole house ran. So we lived like that for quite a while. The only hiccup was our water. Water now well, so there's a pipe that comes that they put in the ground, and it goes into like 3 tanks, and it's gravity fed. But right now, no, we're not off grid. I wish I could go back off grid. I like it. I like that feeling of I can live and be like sustained. But right now we're on electricity, and I'm like, turn every light off in the house if you're not in the same room.
It's funny how your perspective changes about that kind of stuff when you go without it or do it differently for a while. We've never done off-grid, but we recently moved to my husband's family farm that's been in his family for a long time, and his grandma was living here by herself before us. And the power to the house is very questionable. Is probably the best way to put it. I think the original power line, or whatever they call it, where the meter, I don't know the language, but where they originally got access to the power at the house was like in very beginning, and hasn't been touched since then. So now that we are here and we have like a young family that has things to plug in and lights that we want to turn on, and there's a lot of issues with the lights flickering if you put too many things on at the same time. So I actually am recording, as you can see, in mostly the dark. And I have to do it in the living room because the light in where my desk is flickers if you leave it on for more than like 5 minutes. It's real fun to try to explain to people who are not familiar with those kinds of situations. But
yeah, it does become interesting to explain stuff, because I think everything's become so modernized, and people, I think, are just shocked that there's still stuff like that.
Right.
My mother-in-law's house is the same thing. It was built like so like way back when, and it's the same thing. Like, you can't, like, there's like lights that flicker if you have too many lights on in the house. I'm like, that's so questionable.
Yes, very much so. I try not to say things like, oh, that's creepy in front of my kids because I'm like, it's just the power. Don't worry. Not supernatural activity or anything, but oh gosh. So are you guys, so now you have power and you have moved into a different home, or what did you guys?
Yeah, so in I think it was 2013, we had it was my husband's uncle's house. His uncle had passed away. It was a beautiful log cabin. It was huge. But it burnt down. We don't know what happened. We were just sleeping and it was on fire. So we lost that. It wasn't anything that was permanent because the house was so old. So we moved into one of the old hunting cabins, and the old hunting cabin we've been remodeling. But it's actually one that my great grandfather and Sam's grandfather built together. And they all hunted out of it. And so I actually grew up like visiting that cabin that we live in now.
That is crazy.
It is crazy. So it's like funny to like, I look around the cabin, there's still like little old like things from it that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I did that when I was like, my son's age. And we tell my son stories all the time, like, oh yeah, like back when it was just like a hunting cabin, like we used to do this, we used to do that. And he's like, this was a hunting cabin? And I was like, yeah, I'm like,
really cool.
All over used to come up and stay here.
That is really cool. So as far as access to things in your area, how far away are you guys from like getting things that you need on a daily basis, getting things out to the ranch when you need them? What's that situation look like?
So the ranch itself it's 15 miles to the nearest, like I would say small general store. And they have like, your basic like necessities, milk, bread, and cheese. The new owner is actually doing a really great job with it, and they're bringing a lot more stuff to it. So that's about 15 miles. So it's about 45 minutes one way, just to there. And then to actual like town where there's like fuel and stuff, it's another hour and 15. And that's even like a small town. Like they have a Safeway and 2 gas stations, and then they have like a bunch of like, it's a tourist town. So they have a bunch of touristy stuff. And then to actually like go grocery shopping and like get all the things that I need, like livestock stuff, it's about almost 2 hours one way. So when I go to town, I'm normally traveling over 100 miles, and it's like an all day adventure. So that's just one way. The other way is you can go farther up the coast. They do have fuel and groceries, but everything is so expensive. I don't even know how people like afford the gas prices out there. It's so crazy. So we don't go out that way very often. They don't have any livestock feed or anything out there. So we don't go out that way. So it's typically about 2 hours to where I have to travel for everything for the ranch.
Makes you not want to do it very often, I bet.
No, I don't. I think I go every other week. My son was in baseball, and I was traveling twice a week to town, and I was like, oh, I need this to be over. So bad. I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And they just opened up spring baseball. So I'm like, oh, I only have a couple months off and I'm back to driving.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
It's a good podcast to kill time on that drive.
Like, yeah. I love to listen to podcasts, but my son's like hates it. And I'm like, I really need to like listen to some podcasts, kid. So I did buy a pair of headphones. I'm like, when I'm listening to podcasts, you can listen to your headphones and your music, and I'm gonna podcast it up.
I have to do the same thing. My kids, they love to talk to me in the car, which is great. Like I love to talk to them, but sometimes on like long drives, I'm like, I just need to do something else besides.
Well, if you're driving a lot, you definitely get used to like ways to like entertain them and get their attention, so you can't have a few minutes of like silence. Yeah, I would every once in a while when I'm needing like that moment of silence, I'll tell my son, I'm like, hey, like we're gonna play a silent game for 5 minutes, and he's like, you need a break, huh, mom? And I'm like, my brain needs a break, yes.
A little less stimulation, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, I think that how rural some of these places are, that people in agriculture are out there living and producing, whether livestock or crop, is a huge factor in what that role on the farm looks like for you guys. We are a lot closer here, but some other folks on the podcast have been in similar situations to you, where it's like multiple hours to the nearest option to get anything. And it complicates so much in your life that I think a lot of people really take for granted anymore, that some of these things are specialty items and it's hard to get them delivered too. We talked a little bit about that back and forth on Instagram.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I didn't think about when I started this was a vet coming out here. We don't have any vets that will come out at all to help, especially in like an emergency. Like when I first started, I was like, you guys won't even come out in an emergency. Like I'll pay you like 10 times the amount to come out and help. They're like, no, we don't travel out that far. It's just too far. And I'm like, so I've gotten a good relationship with them. So they're more willing to talk me through things over the phone or lend like a ton of advice. But there's some things like I just can't do because I don't either have access to the medications or I just don't know how to do. So, that's been an interesting thing to deal with. As far as that goes, that's been like one of my biggest stressors, with owning livestock is like, I am the vet. That's it. unless I'm able to haul them to the vet, which occasionally that does happen. But for the most part, I'm it.
Yeah. And that kind of situation is getting more and more common as large animal vets are getting less around.
I know our vet I think they just got one just retired and they don't have anyone new coming in. And it's just so sad as that gets like more and more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I said when we started this, I don't know a whole lot about sheep. It's not super common in our area. We're in Kansas and there's not just a lot of sheep farms. It's like considered very specialty here.
Oh, really?
So I'm anxious to learn more about the sheep and what all goes into that, what that looks like for you. So 2 questions. 1, what was it about Icelandic sheep that you chose, why you chose that breed or that breed? And then 2, can you kind of like walk us through the seasons of the year, the different things that you are doing throughout the year to manage your livestock? Yeah.
So the Icelandic breed, I had seen someone post on Instagram that breed. I think it was actually a Shetland, which is like they look pretty similar. And I was like, oh, like they look really interesting. So I started doing more, and then the Icelandic sheep got brought up, and the sheep industry as a whole, like a lot of, like my neighbor, she has sheep and she raises Dorsets, and they don't, to me, like the whole animal isn't utilized. And so I really wanted to find something where I could utilize the entire animal. So when I have a set of sheep that go to the harvest barn, their horns are being utilized, their hides are being utilized because they have really pretty fleece. When they get sheared, I'm able to use their wool for felting projects, or I sell their wool for felting projects. Or in spinning projects. So I wanted a more dual purpose breed, and I also wanted a hardy breed. And so when I went out, I actually went and visited someone that had Icelandic. So when I went out and visited them, I was like, wow, they're like really independent. I love their attitude. Like they have like a very independent, wild attitude. Like they don't flock together like a normal sheep, which can be difficult when I'm trying to work them, because like you might have like 2 that are like, no, I'm not stupid, I'm not going in that pen, like bye. So it can be difficult, but I really liked how strong and like independent they were. And they also, because they are a heritage breed that hasn't changed much, they haven't been like changed a lot, they will stare down a dog, which for coyotes is actually like a little bit more comforting, because I know that they'll at least try instead of run. And we haven't actually had any predator attacks. So I'm like, I don't know if that's because we finally got guard dogs or the sheep are just that, that tough. But yeah, so that's kind of why I chose them. They're just really pretty sheep. I love their attitude. I love everything about them. They are a little less resistant to parasites. So that is something we have to watch for a little bit more. I don't ever really have any issues because of the way I manage my sheep. And since you asked, seasons, this is my slow season right now, is breeding season. So it's kind of where I get to get caught up on other projects. The rams are all in with the ewes. The Icelandics are seasonal breeders. So they breed from end of October, I think, to April, is when you can still have them breeding. But we're normally lambing in late March through April, for us. And then spring and summer is just crazy. Like we're constantly rotating sheep, and constantly doing hoof checks and just sheep checks and everything. And I just acquired a new lease with my mother-in-law. So there's going to be even more work, more rotating. I feel like that's all that I'm doing during spring and summer is like rotate. I'm like constantly rotating sheep, constantly dragging electric netting around. And spring's lambing too, lambing season, and lambing season can get kind of crazy. It's when I'm super exhausted. They typically are good mothers. They're very prolific, but occasionally you get a couple that need that extra guidance, or we get a couple bottle babies. But yeah, and then fall for us is normally, it's a lot of the same. We're rotating. I do in like end of summer, fall, I actually start doing a lot of fencing projects, like anything that needs repairs. Like I'll have like all my electric netting out, and I'm like like with the wires, like severing wires and adding wires together. And my husband's like, you look crazy in the front yard with all your netting laid out. So yeah, that's just kind of how it is with the sheep. They get sheared twice a year. They were getting sheared twice a year. I bumped it down to once a year, per the recommendation of my shearer, because he doesn't want to come out here twice a year. So they get sheared, and normally they get sheared in like May, right after lambing season. So that's kind of our schedule. We normally send our meat lambs to the harvest barn, I think twice a year. So we normally do once in spring and then once like towards the end of summer. And then that's kind of it. Like I said, they breed seasonal. So it's not, we don't have like year round meat. Unfortunately, that's the only downside I would say with that. But yeah,
unique to the Icelandic sheep that they're seasonal breeders, or is that just sheep in general?
Some sheep aren't, and some sheep are. So I mean, it just depends on the sheep. Like I know my mother-in-law, I think they're Katahdins, and they'll breed year round.
Gotcha. Well, that's very interesting to hear what your seasonal cycle is like there with the sheep. And then I know you have the pigs as well. Has that grown as well, or how many of those do you have now?
That's growing. It's growing a little bit slower because I focus more on the sheep. They're actually less work. Sheep. And my husband and son actually prefer the pigs over the sheep. I love the sheep though. I normally start breeding them in December, and we hope for like March babies.
Okay.
It normally ends up that I'm lambing and having piglets at the same time. This year we had surprise piglets though, so it's going to get pushed back. So yeah, they are a lot of the same too. I don't rotate them, during like the rainy season. Like they kind of get like in like, area, like sacrifice areas, cause they're pretty hard on the ground, and we don't want them to tear up the ground too bad. So yeah, during end of fall through winter, they're in the sacrifice areas. And then when spring hits and they start having, their piglets, they go out on the pasture and they're rotated through the pastures.
Gotcha. And then are you raising those piglets to harvest, or what?
Yeah. So we have some, I'll set so much aside for harvest, and then I actually have like a pretty decent amount of people that like homesteaders that buy to raise for themselves. And I'm starting to do that with like the sheep a little bit. I just sold my first pair of lambs to homesteaders, so that was like kind of an interesting thing. So I haven't done that yet. And they're like, oh, we want to buy more next year. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, this is awesome. So yeah, right now we sell whole hogs. But I'm working towards USDA and selling individual cuts, like I do the sheep. It's just been a little bit more difficult, with getting in with the processors and stuff. So
what's that relationship like with the processor for your sheep and your hogs? And then how far is that you have to go for that?
So they're great. There's actually a bunch of processors. We just got like a bunch of them, and there are a couple that are closer, but they're so hard to get into. And it seems like they aren't like a one-stop shop. Like one goes to like one facility, then it's transferred to another facility for butchering, and then it's transferred to another facility to go into a freezer. And I really don't care for that. Like, I want it to be like a one-stop shop. Like, I don't want the animal. I don't want to have it like it going through so many channels. So the processor that I work with, they are fifth generation ranchers, so they understand the system and understand all the hardships and everything, and they're super nice. I think they're similar to my age, but which is amazing that they opened up their own processing facility, especially in our area. So they're 2 hours away from me, and they're one-stop shops. They do the butcher and the packaging, and then I pick it up from them, and they've been great to work with, and typically easy to get in with. I think our busy season to try and get in with them is normally in like summer, so I have to like definitely plan that out, and that gets hard too with living where I live and like having the time to like make sure I can like get to the processor on time and have no hiccups happen down the hill. Like I think the last time I went to the processor, like the tire on the trailer went out, and I was like, oh no.
That's stressful no matter what, but when you have that far to go, I feel like it's super stressful.
Yeah, that's yesterday. I need to get tires from my truck, and I'm like, I started thinking of something. I've never, living up here, I've never gotten broke down in a spot without self-service, and it's like I want to keep it that way because I don't know. I told my husband like on the phone last night, like, I don't know what I would do. Like, do I hike 10 miles back like towards the house to get cell service, or do I keep hiking down to get cell service? Like, which way do I go?
Yeah. I'm so glad you could join us today. You can support the mission of the Farming on Purpose podcast and be part of the tribe dedicated to building ag legacies at farmingonpurpose.com/shop. You'll find apparel, office supplies, stickers, planners, and more, all inspired by the people living out ag legacies every day. Well, it's interesting to hear how that all works for you guys. What about the fiber? What's your kind of next step after shearing with that?
So the fiber, I actually have had a couple people locally reach out to me that want to start using it for like spinning. So I'm learning a little bit more about that from them, on what they need for that. My sheep are in some pretty heavy brush some of the time of the year, so that kind of like wrecks their wool. So I definitely have to plan that out to make sure that's not like all messed up for them. But I typically use the wool in my pasture, and I've been spreading it out over like spots that are bare, and putting seed down. I put the wool down, and then it like sprouts the seeds, and then I use it. I'm dabbling in spinning myself. Like, I'm trying to learn. I'm like, this is so difficult. No wonder why everyone doesn't do this. But I make dryer balls out of it. My mom's starting to like felt little creatures. Like, she sent me a picture the other day. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is like a sheep mouse thing that you got going on. I'm like, it's super cute though.
Aww.
So yeah, that's what I'm doing with that. And then, like I said, when I have the sheep processed, I I keep their hides. And so I'm having hides. I do the hide tanning myself. It's getting to be a little bit much with the amount of sheep. So I'll probably be outsourcing that portion of it.
And what do you do with the tanned hides?
Sell them.
Is that like, what do people, this is so naive, but what do people use those for? Is it like
decor? Like I have one on the back of my couch right now. Yeah. And my mom has like 2 of them in her living room over the back.
Okay.
Yeah. My aunt has like a small boutique store, full of like unique items. And she's always like, oh my gosh, can I buy some of those? But I normally, like when I get them, like they're gone so quick. And I'm like, I'm sorry. So yeah, that's most people use them for.
Neat. Well, there's so much that goes into trying to use the whole animal, like you said, and that's a big goal for you. Is that something that is important to you because of your background or just like management wise, or why was that such a big focus for you going into it?
I was raised in a hunting family, and it's always just been instilled in us that like it's just respect for the animal, to use the whole animal if you can. I just started, I haven't released it yet, but I just started making tallow and lard, like the lard from the pigs. I make lead balm out of that. So that's just another thing that I was like, it normally gets wasted and thrown away, and I'm like, how can I use it and the business benefit from it too? And we respect the animal in that way too. So
that's really cool. There's so much extra work that goes into that. Do you get overwhelmed with all of the different like systems you're putting in place?
I do. And it's all, I get really overwhelmed and stressed out. Like my husband's like, take a deep breath. I do worry in the future that when stuff starts to really take off, stuff's already taking off, that it will become too much. And because of where I live, I'm not able to actually bring in help. So that is a future thing that I'm already like kind of like thinking about and like ways I can like manage that. Because I also homeschool my son, so he's with me 24/7. He helps me out, but no, I'm homeschooling too. So it's like it does feel some days like a little heavy.
Yeah, there's only so many hours in the day and so many things to take responsibility for.
Right. Yeah.
What is that like having your son at home while you're managing the farm and trying to homeschool? What's that been like, or why is that important to you?
So he was going to the school in our small town, which is 45 minutes away. And that school, I think right now only has 25 kids. And so there's like 4 grades to a classroom. They're all in one classroom. And he was just falling behind so bad. So, and then the drive just got so tiring along with everything else. Like I think it was not last year, but the year before, during lambing season, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't drive him to school and like the whole back and forth, like, so I made the big decision this last year to take him out, and we've been homeschooling. So this is our 2nd year homeschooling. And it's been interesting. But we really like it, and it's been a lot less stressful. And he's learned so much because he's with me a lot of the time. So last year he was like right in there with me. Like he helped me deliver a lamb. He delivered a couple piglets. Luckily he was there because my hand was like way too big for what was going on. I was like, your hand. So he's learning a lot. It's been really good for us. We've gotten a lot closer. It's just been, I think, a lot easier. Like the drive was like tiring to him too. Like it was just a fight to get him to get up like that early in the morning and to get down to school. I was like, no, like this isn't working anymore. This isn't working anymore. We need to pivot. So I think, and then that actually homeschooling him actually has made it so I've been using a planner more. Like I've actually gotten more scheduled, which is really nice because I never really was like that person. I was just like fly by the seat of my pants and did what I want. And then I couldn't figure out like why everything was always like chaos. So I've been using a planner a lot more. I'm actually like super proud. This last year, I bought the planner and I finished it this year. I showed my husband, like, look, I use this planner every single day.
That's awesome.
I was a little bit more organized.
That's really cool. What kind of a planner do you use?
I use the Plum planner.
Oh, I think I've seen those.
Yeah. So you can like customize it. So it was really easy for me to like do blocks. I had like a homeschooling block, a work block, a family block of pages and stuff. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I've never finished a planner all the way through, but I'm kind of on a planner kick recently. And I'm really excited. I just got one that's like a 90-day planner. So it's like to help you focus in on some really key goals for 90 days. I'm excited to start using that, but I've been similar. I'll like use it for a little bit and then I'm like, I can't do this. I need my chaos back.
And like half the time, like, and my husband mentions it, well, half the time the stuff that you write down there, you don't even like, your life is so like chaotic with like the animals and everything. He's like, you don't follow it. I'm like, yeah, but it felt good to write it down and I had a plan. And even though I had to like shift it, it's still just like writing it down, being like, okay, like I have, it's all down in front of me. Like,
I think it's like that thinking ahead of time. That's helpful because it's like, even if it doesn't happen, I took the time to think about it and kind of get in the mindset for how to make that decision.
Exactly.
I think it's so interesting to hear from you being so rural there in California, because that is not the stereotype of what people think California living is like. What do you wish people knew more about how that lifestyle is for you guys?
I wish people knew that there's a lot more to California. It's a very big state. It's very spread out. There's, we have very big cities and then we have very large like areas that are, park and privately owned land. And so I just wish people knew that there still are like areas like mine out there, that don't have access to like all the they don't have a Target, they don't have a gas station, they don't have like grocery stores, and not all services are gonna come out here. I think we've been looking for a roofer for like a year and a half now to come out here, but I'm like, every time they see the address, they're like, that's really far. No.
Oh man.
So it's like,
back to where we go, right?
So I wish people knew that California is more than just LA, San Francisco, and then like the border of Oregon and the next state. It's like it's huge, and we're very, very diverse. There's tons of farms, tons of everything here, but we definitely still have rural areas and small towns. It's funny on social media, people are like, oh, you live in California, like, and then like they start seeing a little bit more on my Instagram stories and they're like, that's California. And I'm like, yeah, there's still this here. It still exists. It's starting to shrink, but yeah.
It's just not at all what you imagine or how it's portrayed online or on TV or anything like that. I've been to California once, but it was definitely too like that touristy area that everybody pictures. Well, I think it's interesting what you're doing and really cool how you are growing the way that you are as you are expanding, as everything has been, it sounds like, maybe to your husband's dismay at some points. What have you been thinking about as you grow that you like, I really want to focus on this, or this is the part that is really meaningful to me? What's been important to you about that process?
So I think it's important to know the big goal. So when I first started, it was a dream that I had, that was like my own personal dream. And then as I got more into it, I guess another thing I would want people to know about California is like, it's an expensive state. And so one of the things that's always been a struggle, is the family land and keeping it. And so like as taxes and prices and things go up, it's always like a constant like worry. And so when I started this, I was like, oh, this is my dream. Like, I have all these goals and I still have those goals. I think my ultimate goal would to be, to leave something behind for my son, so he isn't just getting a piece of land that he's having to also worry about, but that's like, it's actually like making an income for him. And whether he wants to keep ranching or hire someone else to take it over, at least like that's there. So he has a little bit of stability, knowing that he can keep that. So that's my main goal. As far as my little stepping stones, I'd like to ship nationwide. Right now I'm only shipping to Oregon, Nevada, and Utah, and California. And obviously I want to get the pork into that. And right now we're just doing local. And then I'd like to host events up here. It's such a beautiful area, and I think it has a lot to offer. And so I think it'd be fun to do like a couple women's retreats, and then a couple like maybe even kids and parents like retreat to like get people out of the city, like, and come here and see and learn. I think that would be like really cool. And that's definitely on my to-do list.
That sounds so cool. As far as you said, you want to ship nationwide, for people who are not as familiar with eating lamb, what do they need to know about trying it for the first time, or like how they should prepare it?
Not all sheep are created equal. I'm going to go with that. Like, there are certain breeds that just taste woolier than others. That was one of the reasons why I went with the breed that I have now. It doesn't have a woolly flavor. It's so mild and so tender. But I think I would say my biggest thing is don't overcook it. Everyone always cooks it to temperature, and then it's like sitting longer, and then it just tastes good. So I'm always like, pull it off before like it gets to that temperature and let it rest. That would be my biggest advice when cooking lamb. Don't overcook it. And I think another big stigma around lamb is it always has to be like rosemary. Like, you have to have like rosemary like with it. You don't. I was just actually visiting my friend yesterday, and he's like, I had your ground lamb. He's like, we had lamb tacos. So he made tacos out of it. So it's versatile, like just like any other meat. But I think there's like a big stigma. It has to be like rosemary. Everything's for rosemary. It's only Sunday night dinner, and it's definitely not. You can definitely have it every day. If anything, I'd say it's like a lighter. I think the most thing people have been telling me, they're like, oh, it's like a lighter beef. Like, I guess, it's still a red meat. And depending on where you get your lamb from, it can have like, it's just a lighter beef, I guess you could say.
Good to know.
At least mine is. But yeah, I would say source your lamb. If you get lamb and you don't like it, maybe try a different farm closer by. And definitely experiment with it. Like, don't just read a recipe like, oh, have you rosemary again and sage or something like that. Because you can definitely do a lot of stuff with it.
That is really good to know. Is there anything that folks should look for in like different cuts that are available? Like in beef, I know we always look for like a certain level of marbling, or is there things like that you want to look for with lamb?
I definitely like notice a difference when a lamb is like grain fed versus the grass finished. I personally like the grass finished, but my neighbor, like miles down the road, they grain finish theirs, and so you can definitely like taste the difference. I mean that's something I would look for, something I would ask about. I definitely would, like I said, I think the breed, it's like really important with the breed and the time of year that they're butchered. The time of year that they're butchered definitely matters. Like, if you're butchering during seasons of rut, like the male can taste funkier than, if you would butcher them like in summer or spring. So yeah.
So much to learn about new things. And I should clarify that we have sheep in Kansas. It's just mostly like for show lambs.
Okay.
That kind of thing. Not like a lot of people that are producing it for the meat and the fiber. But well, okay. Lots of ground that we've covered today. You have a lot of cool stuff going on, and I love hearing how you're growing. What, I know you've got some other things that are happening too on your website. Tell us more about that.
With what?
I think you had mentioned that you have some things that you sell there from some local makers.
Oh yeah. So I'm expanding the ranch. Sorry, my brain. I'm my ranch goods. So like the ranch goods section of the website, like I have some stuff that I make, and then I try and source locally, like other people that make handmade goods, and then just the general US. So I have some people that I've been working with. There's a company out of Arizona. They just made me some custom tea towels, and they're super cute, and they're 100% cotton. There's another company, another shepherdess that makes wool sponges, which is super exciting because I can't wait to use them, use my own. So those are coming to the ranch goods stores. And then, like I said, I'm making tallow face balm, and then the lard lip balm. And then I have some other, like I make the wool dryer balls, and I have some other things coming out on that too. So yeah, I've been trying to like diversify in that sense, brings in like an income for the ranch, my little ranch. And, I'm able to use a lot of the animal stuff too, along with that. Cause I'm supposed to be making tallow or lard candles. So I'm like messing around with that stuff, and seeing how I can incorporate that into the ranch goods. And then, so I ship that. And then I also kind of just do a few local, either like craft fairs, or like in December, my friend just invited me to, there's like a vendor thing at like one of the local schools, and it's like a Waldorf type school. So people that are into that kind of stuff. So I do that probably like kind of twice a year.
Very cool. I think it's always good when you can diversify, especially as like a young farmer who's growing, because with us, like, one hard lesson to learn in ranching can like make your life really difficult. And it's like, okay, am I even going to still be able to do this next year? I don't know. So diversification makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. I wasn't sure if I thought if doing an online store was going to be for me. And it's been like a very slow process because I'm not really good about like talking about it. But I am like, that was one of my goals this year, was to get better. So I'm like, okay, I need to do that. I need to get better at talking about it. And so the craft fairs definitely help with that too. Because then you're kind of getting yourself out there. But yeah, I definitely need, I'm definitely putting energy into that, and making sure that all the goods that I'm bringing into that are locally or like made in the US by like local makers. That's really important to me. And it helps other, like the one local maker I'm working with, they're like, oh, wow, thank you for ordering like so much. And like, you know, they're super excited. So it builds relationships too.
Yeah. Always cool when you can work together with other people who have cool stuff.
Yeah. It's nice to work like the people with the wool sponges. It's like, you know, they're doing what I'm doing. So I'm like, it's really cool. I'm like, okay, well, I'll buy your sponges from you, because I support the values and everything. So
yeah. Well, I realized one question I didn't ask when we were kind of talking about the production and everything you're doing there is, what has been some of your biggest learning opportunities as you have started to grow more?
With the particular sheep that I have, I wish I would have known, like they have a high mineral requirement. So that's been a little bit of a learning curve there. Because I got like 50 million different answers from people, including the vet. Like picking a breed, a heritage breed, like I did, in the area that I live in, was probably like definitely like a learning curve, because they're different than, you know, like the Dorsets and all the other ones that are, you know, that are commercially here. So like when I asked other producers about it, they feed different. Their mineral requirements are different. So that's been difficult for me, because I don't really have a ton of local mentors that know a lot about that breed. Another big thing, I guess a learning curve, which I wish people talked more about, is sheep are not easy. They're always trying to unalive themselves. And I guess that's the best way to put it. they require a ton more management. And I think that's probably one of the top 3 reasons why the sheep industry is like slowly like kind of dwindling. Is it's just the amount of work that goes into it is a lot. Like you don't get really paid for that for some of it. So I wish that was something I would have like I still probably would have gotten the sheep anyways. But I wish I would have known that going into it. And then the other thing is people don't know a lot about land meat, surprisingly. Like, it just, because after the war, it just kind of went away and people had like this stigma of it. I think a lot of people think it just tastes like woolly and nasty. So I wish people knew that it actually tastes really good.
Fact that they try to unalive themselves, as you said, knowing that ahead of time, you probably would have had an easier time emotionally, because it can be so upsetting when those things start to happen. And I feel like if it's one, it's always like 5 more then. And it's just very discouraging when they
always are just like looking for I always like to explain that they're like toddlers. They're always looking for trouble. Like, they're like, oh, mom's not looking, so let's just go get into trouble. And I always have like the rule in my house is don't go check on the sheep if you're needing to be somewhere. Like, if you need to be somewhere, you're like in a hurry, don't go check on them, because guaranteed, like this morning, I told myself, I was like, let's get our chores done this morning because we're heading out of town later. And I was like, in that way, like when we're done, like, you know, we don't have to worry. We just go get in the truck and go. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, no, we're going to leave the sheep for after. We're not going to go check on the sheep right now.
It'll always take too long.
Yeah, guaranteed there's something going on.
Oh, man. Well, last couple questions I have here is the first one is, what kind of advice would you give to someone who wants to get started doing something like what you do, or just get started in farming and ranching in general?
Definitely reach out to a local farm. Someone that's willing to like take the time to like go over things with you, explain things with the way they do. If you have the opportunity to maybe go to a couple different farms, different styles of management to see like what's going to work with you. Because everyone does stuff different, and like what one person's doing may not work for the other one. And when I first started, that's kind of, I had probably 4 different people that I reached out to, and their management styles and the things that they did were like completely like different from each other. And so I was like, oh my gosh, which one do I pick? And I realized when I got more into it, I'm like, I don't have to actually pick a certain one. I just need to pick what works for me. So definitely, I feel like reaching out to other local farms is the way to go, and making sure you have access to a vet if you can. That would be a big help. And then definitely like doing research on leased land. Like I have the opportunity to have some land, I lease it. But not everyone has that opportunity. I know that can be difficult. So if you're starting out, and you have big dreams and goals, definitely like that could be like a huge like burden to like deal with. So yeah, reaching out to mentors, just doing some general research, I think would be good.
Access to land is like a whole can of worms.
It's so crazy. There was, before I took this lease, I was like looking at other leased areas, which I was going to have to drive like an hour. And it was just so expensive. I was like, yeah, I don't think like right now there's no way I can like do this. And then the lease with my husband's mom came up, and I was like, I think I can do that. I think I can speak this. So, and then have to drive an hour.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the last question I want to ask then today is, what has you fired up lately, or what did we not get the chance to talk about yet today that you really wanted to talk about?
I think that what has me fired up lately is it's property taxes, honestly. It's just, that's been a like really huge stressor. Like we just had $1,000 just for the fire departments to fight fires. And for us, they don't fight fires for us out here. Like, so there's a big fire, and it's going to threaten like a town. They'll fight that versus like out here. So we're kind of left to fend on our own. So that was kind of like, I'm like, wow, we're paying, per parcel for $100 per parcel, and we still don't have the support out here. So yeah, that's been on my mind. The other thing that's been on my mind is the fact that things have been made so difficult for people to get into like the processors, like the farmers and ranchers. It's just like we don't have enough. So that's been difficult.
Yeah. Does that cause you issues like as far as trying to plan when you're going to send them there?
Yeah.
As far as like how finished they are, or?
Yeah, it does. Like, this last, it was in July, I had a group go in and they were like, well, you either need to bring them in like tomorrow or we're not going to be able to get you until September. And I was like, they definitely needed I would say like another month. I thought I was calling ahead. But they're just so slammed and like overbooked. Because there's just enough of the processors, USDA, in our area.
Yeah. We had, you'll have to listen when it comes out, but I had a meat market on an interview that it'll be coming out here in November. And they talked about just how much of a jump it is to get to a USDA inspected plant from your local or your state level one, and how much different the requirements are. It's like, it's no wonder that they're slammed, because that's like completely ridiculous to think about.
Well, and it makes it difficult too. Like, I mean, so it's difficult for us, difficult for the butchers and the processors, because we're all like, why isn't this working? And then you have your customers and trying to explain to them, especially if you're processing whole animals, they just like, they don't understand that there's like just so much difficulties in like politics and everything like in play that, it's like we're trying our best, but it just kind of goes with everything else.
For sure. Well, and then the wildfires out there, I think we could do a whole episode on all of the challenges that go along with that in your area.
Yeah, it's gotten a little bit better because of the goat and sheep grazing. I was dabbling in that, but because of where I live, it's really hard being one person to do that. But with the grazers, they're doing like amazing work, and other states are following suit. Other states are calling. My mom actually is a vegetation management specialist, and so that's what she does. And she had someone from Colorado call her, and they're like, hey, we want to like implement your program in Colorado to counteract like our wildfires. So it's kind of neat to see how, I mean, California has always been like the leading that stuff first. So it's kind of neat to see how this is like transitioning over to other states, and how like other states are going to hopefully be using sheep and goats to counteract that.
That'll be really cool to see how that changes things.
It will be cool to see how that'll work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode, Charity. I enjoyed getting to talk to you and learn more about what you're doing and about sheep. If folks want to follow up with you or learn more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and they can always reach out to me like through my website if they want to chat via email.
Perfect. And it's Wild Things Ranch is your
name. It's Wild Things Ranch. It's Wild Things _ranch.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes so folks can find you. Thank you again so much for sharing what you guys do today. If you've enjoyed spending time with us today, please take a moment to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or join the conversation on social media. Do you have a topic you would like to discuss or know someone with a story to share? Apply to be a guest on the podcast at farmingonpurpose.com. You can follow the host of Farming on Purpose, Lexi, on your favorite social media platforms for more content by searching for Farming on Purpose. And remember, if you look around your table and aren't inspired by the people there, it's time to find a new seat.